Well, let's dive in. Jay, thank you for joining us on the Pair program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is another bonus episode of a mini series that we call How We Hatched. Today, we're excited to have Jay Rozzi with us. Jay is the vice president, principal engineer, and partner at Creare, an innovative company based in New Hampshire that operates a unique cluster of small entrepreneurial businesses focused on technology development in some really progressive areas. And we'll dive into those areas, but just to give the listeners a little bit of a sneak preview. This includes things like sensors and controls systems, power systems, advanced manufacturing, and biomedical and human systems for government and commercial customers. So Jay, thanks for spending some time with us. Great to have you on the pod.
No, it's great to be here.
All right. So we've got a lot to cover, but first let's start with something, pretty deep off the break. What did Jay Rozzi have for breakfast this morning?
Jay Rozzi had 4 eggs for breakfast this morning.
4 eggs. That's a strong breakfast. How do you like your eggs cooked? What are you going with?
Just not like scrambled, but just sort of in like a, how would you say, almost like a pancake kind of a thing.
Gotcha. Almost a borderline omelet.
Borderline omelet. That's exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly. There's nothing on it.
I dig it. That's a strong start to the day. Well, in true kind of how we hatch form, we're obviously going to talk a little bit more about the technology that you guys are developing at Creare, but I want to learn a little bit more about, your journey as the entrepreneur. So let's kind of start there. Could you just take me back to, where did you grow up and what led you into this seat in the role at Creare?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in a town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania called Moon, oddly enough. It's very near the airport. So if you ever fly through Pittsburgh Airport, you're pretty close to where I grew up. It's interesting. When I was in high school, most kids wanted to go to a local college like Pitt or Penn State. I wanted to do anything but that. And back in those days, Purdue was I had a friend of mine who went to Purdue, and I went out to visit him, really liked the school. And the tuition actually for an out-of-state student at that time, which is much different than it is today, was less than it was for me to go in-state to Penn State. You're a bit younger vintage than I am. Back in those days, the college experience was a bit more austere than it is today. I think my tuition was something around $2,000 or $2,500 a semester.
Good old days.
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of where I started out. And interestingly enough, as back in those days, I was really focused on graduating in 4 years. I didn't come from a family that had a lot of means. And so, I had to focus on sort of getting out of school, getting a job and helping out. Come my senior year, I had done reasonably well, and a professor approached me about graduate school, which I hadn't given a moment's thought to. I just thought graduate students were these weird people who stuck around school too long. But he said, talk to me about the project that he wanted me to work on. It was basically coming up with a way to optimize the spray configuration for cooling of aluminum extrusions. So it was a boiling and two-phase flow problem. And I was interested in heat transfer and materials and controls and that sort of thing. And it was an opportunity to build a big facility and do some really cool research. And I remember honestly calling my father and telling him, gee, Dad, I think I want to stick around for grad school. And there was a palpable sigh on the phone. And he said,
dollar signs,
exactly.
Ching.
He says, how much is this going to cost me? And I said, Dad, it won't cost you a thing. It's a research assistantship. So my tuition's paid and I get a stipend. And he immediately said, this is the best idea ever. You should do this.
That's fantastic.
So I stuck around for a couple of years after undergrad and did that project, which I think pursuit of additional education particularly for engineers is always recommended. I always recommend people stay in school if they can. And if they're going to do a master's, I think doing a thesis master's is the best possible way to do it. You gain some additional experience. You have to build something. You have to test something. You have to prove, you have to present the results to a committee. All of that stuff I think is good. And it was a great experience for me. I was a little burnt out, so I decided not to stay immediately at Purdue for a PhD. So I went out to work for a couple of years at Creare in Syracuse, New York. Got married during that time period, and very quickly determined, at least to achieve my career goals, I wanted to get a PhD. So my new wife was kind enough to let me start looking at schools again, and tried not to go back to Purdue as much as possible. Looked at a bunch of different schools, toured a bunch, had a few great offers. Then I got a call from a different advisor that I really respected at Purdue, again in heat transfer, Frank and Creare, who those of your listeners who are engineers, if they look on their shelf and they see their heat transfer textbook from undergrad in Creare and DeWitt, he was the co-author on. But I got to work with him for 4.5 years doing laser-assisted machining of ceramics, which was basically the same sort of thing. Build a big facility, do some modeling, figure out how this works, and work with at that time we were working with Cummins engine to figure out how to integrate these things into actual diesel engines because they had a lot of advantages, but they were difficult to manufacture. And so that sort of led me toward this whole advanced manufacturing ilk of projects that I really became interested in over time. I always liked the multidisciplinary nature of the problems. I always liked the big experimental facilities and doing things that were industrially relevant, I felt. And so that's kind of what led me down that path. And after grad school, believe it or not, I took a job at Raytheon in Tewksbury, Mass. I had known about Creare for a long period of time before that. Even when I was a master's student, they were recruiting one of the PhD students I was working with. So that was probably 7 or 8 years prior to that. And always thought I would be a good fit. And eventually, sort of the learning curve at a Raytheon is pretty steep, but it does tail off pretty quickly. And I quickly became, let's say, not disillusioned, but unhappy with the way my career was going to go. Thought about starting my own business, and eventually, got an interview at Creare, and they brought me on, and after that, I sort of got in the Creare ecosystem, and it was completely different than even I expected when I got hired. But it was something that really suited my nature really well, and here we are.
Yeah, that's a fascinating journey. Purdue just kept reeling you back in, didn't they?
It really did. It's a fantastic school.
Yeah, for sure.
It's an engineering school. I would say, it has few rivals in mechanical engineering. And of course, I haven't been back there 20-some years, but back when I was an undergrad, you got ground down to the bone your junior and first semester senior year. It was really a test of, do you really want to do this? And so it was a good experience for me. And in grad school, having the opportunity to build experimental facilities and do the modeling and work all that stuff out as a graduate student, I think was really important for two reasons. One, of course, you're doing the science, you're doing the engineering, you're learning about that stuff. But in addition to that, and I just had a conversation with someone about this the other day, you develop some soft skills, right? Because you need people to help you. You need machinists and technicians and folks like that to give you assistance. And you have to communicate effectively and make sure that that they understand what you want, and you have to provide feedback to them in a timely way. And so all of that stuff is lessons that you learn that you carry forward throughout your career.
Yeah, the soft skills, you can't underplay those. I think that's becoming more and more of a real target area for the future workforce. I think that's an area that we hear a lot of just because there's so many kids these days that are just drawn into their phone, right. and they lose a lot of these social skills. And so having that to bring into your career is super vital. Of course, the engineering, the technical chops will always be a need too, but these soft skills, I think that's a great point. And so, going into, your kind of, large, big tech, everybody kind of knows about a Raytheon, that's maybe has some ties into, especially in like the defense space.
Sure.
Getting that experience, I think, is also, a great, way to kind of round out and understand what you want or what you don't want. Because you went down this path, which Creare, how big were they when you first made that move?
70, 80 people at that time. It's a very small company. So very small. And
do you know the roots of Creare, like when it first started?
It started in 1961.
Okay.
With a couple of engineers. One was Bob Dean. So Bob, he actually recently passed away. Lived in this area until that time. He was, I think he was he was in this area for a long period of time, affiliated with Dartmouth, but this company wasn't an outgrowth of Dartmouth. He eventually took a job with Ingersoll out in, I think, Ohio. And long story short, his entire department got laid off, so he was out of a job. He was director of R&D out there. And he said to his wife, gee, I'm going to start a business. We can start it anywhere you want. So where would you like to live? And she said, I'd like to go back to Hanover. And so that's where the company started. And, we are quite literally, I'm probably 50 or 75 yards away from the little farmhouse that the company started in. And it's just kind of grown back in true New England fashion, right? It's grown back and out from there into the 70,000 square foot facility we have today. We don't want to take that farmhouse down because otherwise we lose the setback.
Yeah,
current regulations, but it also has some historical significance too. So and we recognize that.
Wow. Well, shout out to Bob Dean. What a legend. It sounds like he I'm sure he's looking down, very proud of seeing his baby kind of continuing to blossom.
He was a very creative engineer. He was someone who was always, even in his later years, still full of technical ideas and wanting to pursue them. And so, his vision for Creare is, largely kind of what we are today. And it's morphed and changed over the years. But it's principally a research and development firm. We do more products now than we ever have, direct out of Creare and through other pathways that we'll talk about. But tremendous vision, and it must be amazing to ride by here on a bicycle, which you would frequently do, and see this place and what's become of it.
Wow, yeah. Let's use it as a good segue into talking a little bit more about some of these specific problems that you all are solving. We'll start there, kind of give us the high level of some of these problem areas, and then we'll take that and lead it into this innovative approach of having these kind of small businesses under one roof.
Sure. I mean, the real challenge when describing these sorts of things at Creare is the diversity of work that we do, right? So I could pick from a whole bunch of different examples. We just spun out a company for, I'll try to get the acronym right, wireless automated hearing testing systems, or the WATS. And so the idea there was to develop a tech, and we've been working in hearing for a long period of time related to the flight deck cranial that is now on. Now we're supplying to the Navy for all the carrier deck crews. But this technology is more of a hearing testing system that allows you to basically take a sound booth and put it in a headphone.
Wow.
And you can do testing locally. You can do testing on children. And so there was a lot of DoD applications of that particular technology. Obviously, they want, people are in environments where there's a lot of noise, like, behind an F-35 or in an artillery environment. You want to be able to make sure that people don't suffer significant hearing loss from those either impulse events or constant events. And so, this is a way to not have to say, okay, we're going to take this service member or industrial or manufacturing person, take them out of their job, take them to this facility, do this test, and then come back. You can do it in situ very quickly. And so there was a lot of interest, from industry and from the DoD in this technology. And now that's completely spun out. It's its own thing. They wanted to seek outside investment and go off in a different direction, go off in a commercial direction. And we were very supportive of that. But that's sort of the path that they've taken.
And that's kind of where this is such a unique model, right? Because, okay, so if we're going to describe in terms of the primary types of projects that Creare takes on initially, do they tend to start with more of a Department of Defense or a government kind of angle, right?
They tend to start either with some IRAD work that we do ourselves, which is one path. They also tend, because we have technologies that we've been working on for 40 years. A lot of our cryocooler technology has been, we've been doing that since the 70s, and largely most of that is internal work. Some SBIR work, but largely internal, or some internal. But many of the new innovations that we come up with are as a result of the SBIR program.
Yeah.
And most of those, our primary customers there are DoD, NASA, sort of the aerospace and defense markets. We also do work with the Department of Transportation, NIH, DITRA, others. But those are, DoD and NASA are obviously the big dogs in that fight.
Yeah, and that's how we first kind of came across the work that you were doing. We talk a lot on this podcast around SBIRs or SBIRs, and sure. How these companies are, from almost from a commercial perspective, are approaching ways to tap into defense opportunities, and that's still obviously an outlet that many of these commercial startups are starting to understand a little bit more about how to navigate. But this is a little bit of a different concept in the sense that you guys have these technology, these practice areas. You become experts in those designated spaces. And then you determine that there's a commercial opportunity here, at which point it becomes a spin out in a sense.
Yeah, it's probably a little less linear than that.
Yeah, let's talk about it, because it is really unique.
So first a little, so remind me if I forget, but a little history about SBIR, which is, I think relevant in this context, right? So SBIR started in 1982, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And for the next sort of 15 years, it was largely a research and development program. I don't think the government, frankly, knew what to do with it. There were some successes within private industry in terms of commercializing technology associated with it. But I think really in the late 90s and early 2000s, particularly the Department of Defense and NASA soon after, really started to recognize that they could work SBIR technologies into these larger scale technology development plans. And so you look at the F-35 program as an example. It's not the only one, but it's a relevant example, right? Any military aircraft program is what, a 30, 40-year program, start to finish, when you count sustainment. And so what was really smart about what the primes and the federal government through the program offices did was say, okay, we recognize that we're pushing the limits in terms of producing, manufacturing a state-of-the-art aircraft, producing it at rate, and producing it at these aggressive cost targets. And so what they did was they infused, they had this technology development plan where they would infuse SBIR technologies at various points in the design, the development, and then the production and sustainment process. And because, SBIR's sort of main disadvantage is it takes time, right? It takes time to do your phase one. It takes time to get your phase two. It takes time to do enough of those to get to the point where you have a viable technology that you can qualify and get on a
program of record. Yeah.
Yeah. So that challenge is mitigated by doing that sort of technology development planning. That's really where I think SBIR started to play a more significant role in getting into these programs of record on a more regular basis.
That's right.
And so now you're seeing the fruits of all of that labor across. It's not just across all of DoD, but now you're seeing it at NASA, and even DOT is interested in this sort of thing. So
Department of Energy as well.
Exactly. And so you're seeing this spread, more broadly, which is good, right? We want these innovative technologies to get in the hands of the people who need them as quickly as possible. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the goal, right? We want to use the taxpayer dollars as very responsibly, and make sure these things are getting where they need to be.
That's right.
And so, sort of with that as context, stepping back to the how Creare does this, right? Right now, Creare is a private company. We're owned by six partners, six who are principal engineers who are like me, came into the firm at some point and, built a business within the business. And at some point were asked to be a partner, much like the arrangement you would have in a law firm. But that's sort of where, I don't claim, and none of us would claim to be smart enough to know what sort of technology areas are going to be at the forefront 5 years from now, right? So, like when I was hired, we did very little work in advanced manufacturing. It just wasn't something we did. And correspondingly today, I wouldn't have been smart enough to know 3 years ago that AI and machine learning and things like that would be as important as they are right now.
Right.
And so what we try to do is we hire really smart people, and then we give them an opportunity to exercise their entrepreneurial skills, whether they have them when they walk in the door or they learn some of them as a result of working with folks here at Creare. And that really has enabled us to sort of maintain and grow this technical diversity that we've talked about. And as you mentioned, it sort of results in our sort of overall arrangement is as, 8 or 9, 20-person small businesses, 15-person small businesses that are under one roof that share common resources like mechanical technicians or electrical technicians and machinists and accounting and contracts and HR. And so that way, all of those little businesses are mitigating risk by, if I'm really busy with some of the things I'm doing and one of my partners is not, it kind of levels things out for everyone. We're able to sort of maintain and grow very slowly over time. And that at the same time to get technology out of Creare, because we're so focused on not only doing innovative work, but getting it out of here in one way or another, right? Whether that's working with our affiliate or licensing technology, spinning it out, or selling direct products.
Yeah, that's what's unique to me. So, when does it become this kind of light bulb of, okay, there's obviously this need here, let's license this or let's kind of spin off the new business as a result of this focus area?
Yeah, it's so different depending on, what technology you're talking about.
Right.
In many cases, you are, how can I say this? Technology is, we're technologists, right? We develop technology. Business, in my mind, is about relationships, right? At the end of the day. So whether you want to spin something out, you want to license it, you want to sell a direct product, you have to have customers. And those customers have to believe in you and trust you to the point where they want to buy something from you. And even more so, they want to buy something from you that's never been made before. And usually it's for a critical application. And so building that trust takes time, right? It takes time to make your customer comfortable. It takes time to build that relationship. And so the light bulb is more like like a dimmer switch that's getting progressively brighter. It doesn't happen in an instant, but when it happens, you think it's instantaneous. Mm-hmm. It's this slow build of you're developing those relationships, you're understanding the market that you're in, because one of the things I've found over time is, no matter what technology it is that I'm working in, as you get deeper and deeper into, okay, we actually have a product here, we have something that is really sort of impactful, you find that the number of people you talk to goes down exponentially, because those are the people who are really going to push you over the edge, who are going to help you, whether it's creating a market for you, whether it's being interested in licensing that technology from you if they want to take it to scale, or whether it's just simply we want to buy products from you if you can sell them to us.
Sure.
So that's sort of how that progresses in my mind.
Yeah, and so something that jumps out to me, when you talk about hiring just really talented engineers, What's kind of the fabric that you're looking for beyond the technical skill set? We kind of touched on this a little bit about, those soft skills and how important those might be or play into, someone's role here. But, do you all find that you bring folks in from bigger companies? Do you like folks that kind of maybe have a little bit of this entrepreneurial mindset, just kind of given the unique ecosystem that you have here?
We do. I think that some experience is good. I had some experience at a big company and sort of taught me kind of what I didn't want. So we don't necessarily see the big company experience as good or bad.
Okay.
We don't want necessarily a big company attitude, here at Creare. We try to be, as we've gotten bigger and we're doing more products, we have certain systems we have to put in place. But by and large, we try to maintain a culture of as little sort of bureaucracy as possible. Right. But, one of the things that I like to do and that we do broadly when we interview engineers at all levels, but mostly PhDs when we bring them in, is most of the time they're subjected to a few different screening processes, the last of which is an in-person interview and a presentation. And they'll interview with one or more of the partners and several high-level engineers within the firm, all of whom ask 3 or 4 pretty challenging technical questions. And during their interview. And so by the end of the day, you feel like you've been through an oral qualifying exam 4 or 5 times. But the point of that is not, and I tell people this that I host, the point is not to get the right answer. There may not be a right answer to a lot of these questions. The point is, how do you react with something unexpected under pressure?
Sure. And
I remember I have this very distinct memory of one of the first sort of large phase 2 programs that really took off for me. It ended up in multiple phase 3s and a licensed technology to a large company. And I remember I was giving a presentation to someone who could really help me. And it was clear that he wasn't getting it. Like you could just see the glazing over in his eyes as I was talking to him. I said, you know what, let's stop. Let's go to the whiteboard and let's just talk about here's what we're doing.
Sure.
And that sort of recognition, I think, is an outgrowth of bringing in people who kind of are self-aware enough to say, okay, he's not getting this.
Right.
I need to change tack here and give him something that he can understand.
Yeah, that's a really great example. Because, a lot of times engineers they're gonna talk, and if they're not picking up on those social cues of the glaze, like you mentioned, it can completely just, it can really just, lead the opportunity astray, right? You're trying to relate to your customer. I always love like the description of oftentimes like a product manager or a solutions engineer, right? Somebody who's got the techno-functional kind of savvy. There's something to be said about having that ability to relate in layman terms to somebody who might not understand, the capacity that you're at. So that's a good example.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes, I tell young engineers, you have to be able to explain this technology in 3 sentences to your grandmother.
Yeah.
You can do those things and she can say, oh, that's really neat.
Right.
You got it.
That's right. Let's dive into some of these use cases, because this is what kind of really captured my interest when we were on our discovery call. When you're approaching the R&D for projects like the hearing protection helmet, what does that transition from like the military to commercial markets look like? And maybe we'll try. I know it's a long-winded kind of journey, but maybe starting with that, or you can use a different example if you'd like the smart wrench installation tool.
Probably the best one is the fastener measurement tool, frankly.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's really current for us right now.
Yeah.
As is the hearing protection helmet, obviously. But from a commercial standpoint, the development of that particular tool really met a critical need for F-35. They needed to inspect filled and unfilled fasteners during the production of the aircraft, and stop me if I'm providing too much detail here, but the F-35, some say, is a flying group of fasteners. Right, there's 40,000 fasteners on that aircraft.
Wow!
All of them have to be inspected twice. for every aircraft. And so what they do is they have very specific requirements in how far below the outer mold line those fasteners have to be installed initially. And then they get filled with a thermoplastic resin and get inspected again. The whole point is when they put the radar absorbing cover over top of all that stuff, there's no dimples or bumps on that surface that would light up a radar. And so they didn't have a lot of good control of that process. Initially, they're using a lot of ad hoc tools and operator judgment, let's say, to make those inspections, particularly for filled fasteners. And so the fastener measurement tool really took all of that and made it objective, and did so in a way that gave them an answer in 1 or 2 seconds per fastener. So it was both fast, which was critical to make rate, because believe it or not, when we introduced our tool, the main rate limiting step in the entire production of the F-35 aircraft was fastener inspection.
Wow.
And so we're now on our 3rd generation of that tool, and Lockheed's going to be refurbishing their fleet in the next couple of years with our latest version of it. But it was a really sort of a key item for them to get over the hump in terms of production rate and cost reduction.
And you described it to me, it's like, I don't know, you said like almost like taking like a smartphone and
it's about the sort of the size now of like a cordless drill.
Yeah.
With a big screen on the front and a screen on the back. And you walk up, you pull a trigger, it takes a picture and gives you go, no go, and then stores all the critical data associated with that measurement in the device if you need to go and interrogate it later.
Gotcha.
You can do statistical process controls because you can track fastener by fastener. You can do all that stuff with it. And so it's pretty neat. And so, sort of taking that, out of the military market, and because right now where we've gone with that is, and this gets a little bit into Adari. So we started an affiliate company maybe 10, 15 years ago. And we with the mindset that Creare at that time was not very good at doing direct products, particularly products that were of a medium volume, let's say, so sort of hundreds of things.
Sure.
And so our affiliate is really specialized to do that. So our FMT is sold out of our affiliate, Adari. They're now doing 2 or 3 of these sorts of projects right now. But so they've taken that technology and that's where it sits. And they are now sort of working with others to take that into the commercial market. And now what you find is that as you sort of take, the challenge is you've sort of taken this, you have this technology that you've sort of specialized to Lockheed for the F-35 inspection, right? Because no other tool on the market could do this. And so they needed something desperately that would help them do it. So boom, there you go, the FMT. There are advantages in the commercial market to do similar things for other applications. And they are now exploring. They've had maybe, I'll say less than 10, maybe 20 commercial sales of units to various folks. But these tend to be onesie-twosie, and they tend to be a little specialized, looking at particular geometries. And so right now, the focus has continued to be on the defense and military market, but that commercial market, I think, is going to grow over time just because of the capability of the tool and with the flexibility that we're integrating within it as a result of some programs that we're working on right now. Was that an answer to your question?
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And so just so I understand correctly too, though, Adari was already spun up before that. Like, so this isn't just the only thing that Adari is kind of pushing, but you're saying Adari is good at like these types of products that are, going to be in much more higher quantities that they're selling or distributing.
Interestingly enough, Adari was started, I believe, in 2010. It might be 2011. We had done this hearing protection helmet program in the early 2000s, so 2003 to 2007. The Navy at that time was spinning up to produce, to want to buy 5,000 to 10,000 of these helmets at that time. And so we started Adari principally to do that, right? But there was as the fickleness of the defense procurement process sometimes comes back to bite all of us. There was a change in leadership at the Navy. They decided they didn't want to do that anymore. And so Adari had to find something else to do. And so I had some work in, believe it or not, cryogenic machining, which we can get into if we have time. But that was sort of the next thing that they took on, is we were developing our licensing partners and takeout partners for that particular technology. So they were able to slide into that role pretty easily. And now they're doing a lot of that. A lot of that work has grown into other things for advanced heat exchanger design, which they're actually developing. They developed a lot of really neat techniques to manufacture high performance heat exchangers, and now they're working with some significant customers in that market as well.
Interesting.
And then of course the Navy, again, defense procurement, sometimes it's nonlinear, comes back in 2018 and says, hey, we want to do this again because hearing's still a real big problem for all these people on the carrier decks. And so right now, the way that the program works is Creare is the prime, but Idari is doing 95% of the work. They are doing the manufacturing, because most of it is, we're working with some significant subcontractors, and they're helping us out with a lot of the comm systems and things like that. But Idari has the main sort of manufacturing responsibility for that technology.
It's cool how that came full circle. Years later. And I also appreciate your lightheartedness and candor when it comes to the procurement process with the government, because I think I wrote it down, the fickleness and the nonlinear way of procurement, I think is probably the nicest way I've heard it described. So
it happens. It happens. You have to recognize that leadership changes and priorities change. And
that's right.
You have to be patient.
So that's a good point, right? And this is, I think, why this conversation is super valuable to a lot of our listeners, right? And so to kind of set the stage, like what we talked about in our discovery call was, we get a lot of founders, early stage founders, that really smart folks innovating, building something that they maybe say, there's a use case here in some government setting, and they want to go down that path and they want to explore it, right? Where it can sometimes become a bit of a trap, and or just catch them in a tough situation, where you describe the situation like you did with was it the Navy?
Yep.
And had that been a small company, right, that was just all that they were focusing on, or let's just say like the bulk of their runway was going to be tied to this engagement, that's enough to derail and just really cause a small business to entirely fail. And so what advice do you have based on that, again, going back to our conversation, was like, not just putting all your eggs in one basket, but I think what's interesting is like you all have so many different practice areas that you kind of made sure that you expand into. Maybe pull on that thread for a little bit with me, Jay, because that would be helpful for the future founders that are trying to survive the market.
To the extent that you can, if you're a small business with a sort of a one widget kind of a thing,
right?
The government customer is really challenging, right? So the government customer their performance requirements are significant. The market is small, and the contracting is hard. I mean, let's be honest, right? The compliance costs to deal with DoD are not trivial. And so, if your objective is to build a business, build the one widget to sell to the federal government, I would suggest that you diversify as much as you possibly can and come up with a way to generate revenue that doesn't depend on the fickleness of the government procurement process in the interim. And at the same time, you can continue developing and refining your product to really address the perhaps future government need, or the government need that they're not really aware of yet, that they'll need 5 years from now or 2 years from now or whatever.
Right.
There's sort of a dual market within the federal government, right? There's the role Creare fills. It's really kind of unique in that we can handle that fickleness, right? We can deal with a buy of 38 of something, right? If you're a small business that's only doing that one thing, that's not sustainable. So you need to think about other avenues to generate that revenue. and other commercialization paths, then maybe it's an interim product. Maybe it's a subset of the product that you're working on that you could sell into the commercial market that doesn't have all the performance enhancements. Using the FMT as an example, perhaps something that's less capable but more general for the commercial market is something that you could go off and sell for a lower price. And so those sorts of ideas are probably the best advice I could give for those sorts of small businesses. And if you can, diversify.
Yeah,
if that's even
right.
within your technological wheelhouse.
Yeah. We talk a lot with, folks from the investment side of things as well,
Sure.
and some of that feedback is, listen, like if your sole angle here is to continue to just chase like non-dilutive funding opportunities, you're going to find yourself in a tough scenario because that jump to phase 3, as you are probably well aware, it is very challenging to get to. And you might just find yourself, running in phase 1, phase 2 for your evolution of your business. And you have to think about ways to, have that recurring revenue coming through the door, if it's in commercial markets or, some other, form of investment to help you if that's the route you're going to take.
And, one of the things I often say to businesses and to people who don't necessarily understand where SBIR fits in the whole government procurement system is that, because some people will say, well, why doesn't the government write a direct RFP for this stuff rather than go through the trouble of SBIR projects? And the answer to that is, well, if the government writes an RFP, it has to be very specific, right? I want this thing, it needs to be this big, it needs to be painted green, it needs to have this and that, and it needs to weigh this much and be made out of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So people can bid on it. The SBIR process, by and large, are for technologies that don't exist, right? But at the end of that non-dilutive funding, those phase 1s and phase 2s that you do to develop that technology, now you can write that spec sheet by and large, right? And you can go to a government customer and say, look, our stuff does all of these things. Then you have to get over the hurdle of actually qualifying that technology to get it to be used on, whatever system that the ultimate target is. And, for example, the repair system for arresting cables that we put on, that's now on all Navy carriers that we built here at Creare, that was a market of 38. And one of the qualification tests, believe it or not, was they had to explode a depth charge within a certain radius of it and see what would happen.
Wow.
And again, for a lot of these technologies, if it's a new technology, the government doesn't even know what the qualification requirements are. They know what the qualification requirements are for everything that's old,
sure.
Right? But developing those sometimes takes some time as well. So as that's all part of the story of, yes, you need, if you're a single technology company, you really need to think of other ways to generate that revenue to keep you afloat, and that's going to create other opportunities as well.
Yeah, it's great feedback. It's good advice. It's a recurring theme and conversation that we have on the podcast. And we're in a very interesting time where the things are changing with the way that or hopefully we're changing for the best with how technology is acquired in the government. It's not a secret. It's a pain. It's got a lot of bureaucracy tied to it, and we don't have the time for thinking about things that are going to be time sensitive. If it's things for the warfighter if God forbid something were to happen, right? How we get that into the hands of these individuals quickly, things have to change because we can't rely on the way of 10, 15 years to get this into the end user. So I think there's a lot of hope
that small companies might want to think about, and we do this regularly because we can. It's easy for us, but we cross-pollinate technologies across different business areas because we talk, right? So we know what each other's doing, and the FMT, as we talked about, is a good example of that. It started off as a biomedical tool. It was being used to scan organs during minimally invasive surgery through a laparoscope to co-register the organ position with the MRI image, because they change once you open somebody up, to more precisely remove tumors.
No kidding.
Yeah, no, and I was having a conversation with, at the time, one of my partners, and he was, we were talking about this technology, and we took a look at it in the lab, and I said, gee, this is great because a lot of people in manufacturing want to measure things without touching them. Could we do that? And, we started talking about, well, what were the limitations and what we thought we could do. And the main sort of technical challenge wasn't necessarily, generating the information about the surface or the point cloud as it is, but taking that point cloud and processing it quickly into actionable information. That was really the leap. And that's what we were able to focus our attention on. But those sorts of, thinking outside the box things are pretty typical for us. But that's an example of a market that we weren't even considering with this particular technology, and we're able to go off and pursue.
I love that cross-pollination concept. How does that happen? Are you all intentional about having like these cross-pollination meetings, almost like where you're bringing a couple of folks from different tech areas, and hey, let's have a whiteboard sesh about like where we think this could apply into other areas?
Yeah, it's far less organized than that.
I was gonna say, yeah. That's what I'm envisioning.
It's very organic, right? It is. We try to, and it's become challenging as we've gotten bigger, but we try to maintain a small company culture where we talk to one another.
Sure.
And
you're in office, right? You guys, everybody's coming into a physical location.
Yeah, and we're all in our labs and we're all doing stuff there, and it's a matter of, oh, hey, what's that? I haven't seen what's going on here. And if you walk up to one of our mechanical technicians and ask them what's going on with this technology, they'll be able to give you the story because they're as engaged and interested in it as the engineers are.
Sure.
And so, from that perspective, I think that's one of my main missions here among many is to maintain that culture, even as we grow and start doing different things. Because I think that's really the engine that has driven us, gotten us to this point. And I don't want to lose that. So, and it becomes easy to sort of, bureaucracy that out of the organization.
Sure.
And so we want to keep that as much as we possibly can.
That's great that you're thinking about that and intentional when you're applying that to the next new wave of folks that are coming through the door.
Sure.
I want to be mindful of our time, and we do have a fun segment called the 5-second scramble, which we'll get to as our closing. But just in looking towards the future, with Creare, what are some of these areas or some of these projects that your team is getting really excited about when we think about the future at Creare?
Boy, I think
loaded question.
Yeah, no, totally. A lot of one of my colleagues has been working in cryogenics and cryocoolers for the totality of his career. And this technology started at Creare back in the 70s. And he's continued to develop that technology and taken it in all sorts of different directions. And now with all the emphasis on space, potential missions back to the moon, potential missions to Mars, people are coming back and saying, gee, we need long-term cryogen storage. We need zero boil-off. We need all of these things that, Creare has been working on for a long period of time. And so he's doing that. He's also doing things in electronics packages that are truly innovative and market leading. One of the things that you have to recognize is the way that we're going to defeat, threats. So stepping back, satellites, if we wanted to, send up a satellite to do, critical measurements, let's say, in medium or low Earth orbit, the old model was, well, we're going to build one satellite, we're going to put billions of dollars worth of technology on it, and we're going to make sure that it doesn't fail, okay, and launch it. Now, that model's changing. It's changed to, well, let's launch 50 to 75 CubeSats build a distributed network out of all of them. We're going to accept that maybe 2 or 3% of them are going to fail over a certain period of time, and then we'll just launch more. And they're much more cost effective. The real niche that we've floated into is that a lot of the big primes can't deal with a development process that's streamlined because they're built to build those big, I think they're called Class A space systems.
Yeah, the big boys.
Years to develop, and you have to procure from only these suppliers and whatever. We can engineer a system that meets the requirements from a reliability and space viability perspective, but we can do it very quickly. So that means every 2 years you can increase capability. So what does that mean? That means that when you do that, you drive your adversary, let's say, you drive your adversary into bankruptcy because they have to keep developing new hardware to try to defeat your little electronics that now can sense their new hardware. And so that's really exciting. We're getting involved. We've been involved with that for some time, but that's a real market-leading technology that is a neat thing for us because we actually have that technology flying today, and a lot more of it's going to be flying very soon.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'm super intrigued with the space tech movement and the amount of opportunities that creates, and private sector, public sector. Like it's going to be a really, and it's we've never seen it moving as fast as it is right now, and it's really exciting to keep tracking that. But
absolutely.
I'll have to connect you with a few folks that we've had on the pod as well that are dealing with the like very low Earth orbiting technologies. It's really neat.
Nice.
All right, well, let's go ahead and transition to the final segment. This is the 5-second scramble. It's a quick, rapid fire Q&A. We'll talk a little bit about Creare, a little bit about the person Jay Rozzi as well. So, are you ready to rock and roll?
Do it.
All right. So if Creare were an animal, which one would it be?
Oh, a tiger.
Oh, nice. What's a skill that every employee at Creare needs to succeed?
Communication.
Nice. What's a recent win at Creare that made everyone celebrate?
As I mentioned previously, the first launch of those electronic systems, getting them on orbit was a big deal for us.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
What are some of the top, tech roles that you all are hiring for today?
Oh boy. So for engineers, we're a little bit off the reservation in terms of hiring for PhD engineers. We'll hire almost any expertise, as long as you are entrepreneurial, you want to work hard, and you want to sort of push the limits of technology, and you come in with an open mind to learn things that, if you're coming out of graduate school, work on things that will test your boundaries. Let's put it that way. But in terms of, like many companies, we are looking for electronics folks as well, software folks, but all within the same mindset of, you got to be entrepreneurial and you got to be flexible. We value technology generalists, let's say.
That's awesome. What is a charity or cause that's near and dear to you?
Yeah, so my wife and I have donated pretty extensively to what's called Lebanon Opera House, and the reason we did that was when I was a graduate student, unmarried and married, we'd had the wonderful opportunity to go to what was called Purdue Convocations at the time, which was, the student fees to be able to buy this series. So you'd buy like 7 performances during the year, and you would pay very little money. It was probably under $100 for students. And you would get to see, the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra would come up. You'd have an opera. Madame Butterfly was there. So you'd have these wonderful plays, operas, and symphonies that would come and do that. And I always really enjoyed that. Haven't had a chance to do it as much as I would like with a job and children and what have you, but it's something that's near and dear to our heart.
Very cool. What is the first kind of app that you check in the morning?
Usually I check my work email,
Yeah.
which is kind of sad.
Number one answer, actually.
Yeah. And then usually I, hop on the Wall Street Journal and see what the news is for the day. But it's usually either if my kids are traveling, it's text. If it's a normal day, it's my work email.
Cool. Who's a tech pioneer that you think would be the most fun at a party?
I'll say the tech pioneer that I would like to meet is Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
That would be someone I would be really interested in just talking with.
Yeah.
Just to get his thoughts on things. There's all sorts of interesting, video on the internet of Steve Jobs giving interviews in various contexts, and some of that stuff contains some really interesting life lessons in it.
For sure. What is the worst fashion trend that you've ever followed?
Oh boy. Probably I'll have to go back to when I was a kid. So they used to sell these jeans at Kmart called Toughskins.
Okay.
And it wasn't those that were so bad, but we sort of got into the mode of repairing them with these large iron-on blue patches. So I'd have like orange jeans with iron-on blue patches on them. I didn't know that it looked as bad as it did at the time, but you look back at photos and you go, boy, those were interesting.
Well, the way fashion is these days, everything kind of comes back around. So
exactly.
You'll see it.
I'm
on
old
the
enough.
streets.
I've seen 2 or 3 of these trends come back around. So I just keep all the stuff in my closet until it comes back to fashion.
Favorite Disney character?
Oh, goodness. Oh, geez. This presupposes that I've seen a Disney movie or gone to Disney. I don't know.
You get Star Wars in their mix now, though, because they kind of own Star Wars. Okay, yeah, that's a tee up. Yeah,
if Star Wars isn't in the mix, it's got to be Han Solo.
Han Solo. All right. Last question: what was your dream job as a kid?
I want to be an astronaut.
Yeah.
Or a professional golfer.
What are the other? What of them have got to stick?
Yeah, exactly. The golf thing didn't work out. The astronaut thing, well, my eyes are too bad to do anything like that. So I settled on engineering.
I think that's one that a lot of kids dreamed of. So good on you.
Especially, I'm the vintage I am. I was born in '66, so that was right around the time when the space program was really. Television was more popular, and television was becoming popular, and the space program was becoming very popular. So yeah.
Well, and here we are again. Kids should be excited about the future of space exploration.
Absolutely.
With all the advancements. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for spending time with us, Jay. We're excited about the innovative work you all are doing at Creare and both the defense and commercial sectors. You guys are true innovators. So we're rooting for you and your team. And thank you for hanging out with us on the pod.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.